Hello, welcome to another episode of History in the Dark. I am your host, Darkness the Curse. And before we begin, as always, thank you so much to my generous patrons, my British rail critics, and of course, my underwater train finders. You are the reason why this content remains soaring through the skies. And yes, lately I've had more aircraft on the mind ever since I saw the new Top Gun movie. Great movie, by the way. And I decided I don't really know what I'm doing for the next Roundhouse Rumble yet. I have a ton of ideas, but it takes so much editing and time, and it's not a very popular series, and I just really wanted to talk about planes. I just really wanted to do it. So let's do 5 more of the worst aircraft ever, part 3, because there are a decent amount of you that actually enjoy this, and y'all are worth it. The Brewster F2A Buffalo. Why one would name an aircraft after a terrestrial animal of any kind, I will never know. But it is just a name. So, maybe the Buffalo's actually really good. And in its defense, when it was introduced in 1939, it was thought to be pretty much state-of-the-art. It logically should have been pretty good, but it was quickly realized that it wasn't very good. It was the U.S. Navy's first monoplane fighter aircraft, and when the U.S. entered World War II, they quickly realized that compared to the Japanese Zeros and the German 109s, it was insanely outclassed, which is hilarious, because usually when people talk about the air power, especially in the Pacific Theater, when it comes to World War II and United States aircraft, you mention the Wildcat or the Hellcat. The Buffalo apparently won the competition over the Wildcat in 1939. But once the Buffalo proved to be not actually that good, they gave the Wildcat a chance, and it showed itself to be way more maneuverable and able to tangle with the Zeros over the Pacific. The Buffalo just kind of fell by the wayside. It did see service elsewhere though. The Royal Air Force actually used them for a little bit, as did the Royal Netherlands East Indies Army, and interestingly, the Finnish Air Force, who wound up with a few before they actually allied with Germany against their common enemy, the Soviet Union. Confusing, but that happened. The Blackburn B-25 Roc. It was derived from the Blackburn Skua and took its name from the mythical bird of the tales of the Arabian Nights. Introduced in April of 1939, the Roc proved to be hideously disappointing. And to be honest, it was probably only put into service because it was a derivative of an already existing aircraft. The UK didn't have time to fiddle around with experimenting or waiting for new aircraft to put into the skies because World War II was happening whether they liked it or not. So into production the Roc went. Handling was considered to be acceptable, but its performance was really poor. It was violently slow for its time, topping out at only 223 miles per hour. It was slower than pretty much every other aircraft in the skies at that point. And mind you, its primary role was meant to be a carrier-based fighter aircraft. And I ask you, how in the world is a plane supposed to fight any enemies when every single enemy aircraft outpaces them? The answer was not very well, and one squadron commanding officer described them as a constant hindrance, which is an apt way of putting it, and that literally means the Roc was doing more harm than good purely by existing. Somehow, it did manage to shoot down a Ju-88 at some point. How it did this, I do not know, as the 88 was quite a bit faster than the Roc, but sometimes you get lucky, I guess. Lavochkin Gorbanov Gudkov LAGG-3, which I am just going to call the Lag-3 because I'm not saying that more than once. This was a Soviet fighter aircraft, again built for World War II. It was a refinement of the Lag-1, and it was considered one of the first modern aircraft available for the Soviet Air Force when Germany invaded in 1941. Because of this, the Soviets wound up building over 6,500 of the things, despite the fact that they were, completely terrible. They had an entirely wooden construction. That alone isn't necessarily bad. The British Mosquito was known as the wooden wonder for a reason, and it was probably one of the best aircrafts of the war. Wood was prevalent in the Soviet Union, it was easier to get a hold of and use to build than metal would be, so it made sense for them, but despite being wooden, and therefore lighter than a metal-based aircraft, it was still somehow overweight and underpowered. Despite so many of them being in the skies, the only reason for that is that it was really all the Soviets had, and it was outclassed by the 109s, or God help you, the Focke-Wulf 190s. The reason for its underpowered nature had to do with the fact that it used an inline engine. Its successor, the Lavochkin LA-5, used a radial engine, which is a famous and familiar design for prop planes. It was much more powerful, and the LA-5s were actually very, very good. Lag 3, on the other hand, well, it lagged behind, shall we say. I'm sorry for that. I had to. It was right there. You'd have done it too! The Lockheed XFV, sometimes called the Salmon, which, why are you naming a plane after a fish? A floppy fish. I don't know why that's... Maybe it was an insult. I'm not sure. This was an experimental aircraft, and it was designed to be a tail-sitter to demonstrate the operation of a VTOL aircraft, or vertical takeoff and landing. Tail-sitter aircraft were tested by various countries over the years, and this was one of the early American outings. And, well, it flew. I'll give it that. When it was in the air, it was fairly maneuverable, and it worked, so that was something. But, it kind of revealed the issue with a tail-sitting configuration for a plane. See, when you have to land on the plane's tail, it's a little difficult for the pilot to actually see where he's going, and, where to land, and whether he's level or not. There's a whole bunch of variables to consider here. Even the most experienced test pilots struggled badly to land the Salmon. It might actually be easier to land an actual Salmon than land this aircraft, because they just couldn't see where they were going. All you had was 4 tiny wheels on the tail, and a hope and a prayer, I presume. Fortunately, there was no accidents due to this, as the test pilots were very good at their jobs. And even the suits realized the issue here, and the whole thing was cancelled after just a year of experiments. Tail-sitting just wasn't gonna work for VTOL aircraft, and that's why you really don't see them in this configuration these days. The McDonnell Douglas DC-10. This is an odd one, because in the technical sense, this aircraft isn't necessarily terrible. It served for quite a long time, it was considered state-of-the-art when it was introduced in 1971, and when they're flying well, they fly well. They're very good aircraft. So why would it be on a list of worst ever aircraft? Well, that's to do with one major, cripplingly horrific flaw with them. When they were first introduced, they had an issue with their cargo doors. As a modern jet airliner, the cabins on board are pressurized due to the high altitudes that these planes fly at. That, on its own, is fine, that's completely normal. What wasn't normal is the way the aircraft's cargo doors were designed. The DC-10's cargo doors opened outward, not inward, like the plug doors did on pretty much every other airliner at that time. The outward doors required a different design ethos. The point was to enhance internal space so that the door itself wouldn't actually be taking up any room when the plane was loaded with cargo. That's fine, but to overcome the outward force from pressurization, the doors were reliant on heavy locking mechanisms. These mechanisms were flawed. They didn't always lock, and crews weren't trained to double-check that they were. Without these locks in place, the door was at serious risk for suffering explosive decompression. This flaw wound up causing multiple accidents. Crashes painted the DC-10 in a really bad light when it came to public opinion, and people were genuinely scared to fly on them. But to their credit, Douglas did take steps to improve the DC-10 and fix this major flaw. And as of 2008, their safety record isn't actually any different from a typical modern airliner. Since that flaw was fixed, they've been perfectly fine for the most part. Any accidents that have occurred weren't actually due to any faults with the aircraft's design. But it's kind of hard to argue with their initial design. That door issue wound up killing way too many people for me to just ignore it, but in the years since the flaw was fixed, it saw service with many airlines across the entire world, including British Airways. What? No, that's not... No, that's... No. It's different. It's a completely different organization. No. You get out of here. I already have issues with your grounded track-based cousins. I don't need to deal with you. Off you go. And with that, a special thank you goes out to all my underwater train finders. Thomas Ward, Lord Captain Von Thrust III, Some Dude 267, Brightline Blue, Joshua Long, Ohio Trucker 1, Royal Hudson 2860, Lord Hoth 444, Arthur Roy, Benjamin Owens, Panzer Kitsune 131-232, Mr. Black Rose, Tribal Typhoon, Dark Lightning 1536, Master of None, Josh Johnson, and Lock Kraken. Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.